Hey, what's going on, you beautiful people? It's your boy 3 Stacks in this thing, and I'm representing my squad as always. Gotta stay loyal to my people. So today I'm gonna be talking about what deck I feel is going to take the W in national season and also potentially Worlds. Now, this may seem a little biased because I do play the deck, but I think the deck that has the most potential is actually going to be Zephyra. Now, I'm going to get to my reasons very shortly. Now, first I would like to talk a little bit about Zephyra itself as an archetype. Before I get to my reasons why this deck, even if it's being integrated as an engine or in correlation with another powerful deck to incorporate it maybe to a hybrid variant, Zephyra anything is going to be insane. Now, a little bit about the deck. Zephyra is a pendulum archetype, right? There's a story behind it. It's a lore. If you followed the lore from the Hidden Arsenal and the continuation with Necros and Ritual Beasts, Satellanites, BAs, Cleafords, Burning Abyss, Shadows. Zephyra has a lot of those archetypes in itself. But in its core, Zephyra is a pendulum archetype that has some really kooky and strange effects. Some of these things might seem obscure on pen and paper, but when you start to play the deck and the longer you play it and the more experience you obtain playing this deck, you'll learn that you can procure victories inevitably just out of nowhere just by playing your cards right. It's a very, very solid and powerful pendulum archetype. Its inherent flaws and weaknesses are so minimal and also so easy to mask. And what do you mean by mask, 3 Stacks? I mean, the deck's weaknesses, you can hide them because you can integrate other cards into this deck that are powerhouse cards that your opponent needs to stop, cannot allow them to resolve. Bombshells like Cerberus, Electrum. There's so many cards you can play in this deck that you can splash as engines to make it a lot more powerful. There are Zephyra archetypes there are Zephyra builds that have got away with playing tons of hand traps. Now, there's no pendulum deck up to date that can play more than 5 or 6 hand traps without it interfering with the deck's actual consistency. Now, Zephyra is not one of those decks. Zephyra can play 9 to 12 hand traps with ease and not lose any of its consistency. It's the only pendulum deck that can actually generate boards of whether it's a +1 or +2 of 2 to 3 negates consistently off of simply 2 cards, which is insane. When you look at pendulums, as a whole, they've kind of been neutered by the ban list here and there, but they have no 2-card combo that can produce, 2 to 3 negates and generate hand advantage, meaning that the cards that you played have been replaced by other cards so that if this board gets broken, you can still replicate the same thing or even replenish or re-establish the board that you have just created. Zephyra is a pendulum archetype that can do that. Now, the reason why it doesn't have the same inherent weaknesses that other pendulum decks have is because it does not actually need to pendulum summon a lot of monsters. It doesn't really need a lot of scales. You know what I'm saying? Like, some pendulum decks, you gotta have a lot of pendulum monsters in your hand to do so. Zephyrs really only need a high and a low scale to do so. And that they can do that really well because they have some flexible cards in their engine. It's not a deck that's going to lose to Dimensional Barrier because not only can they link summon, they're afforded rituals, which I don't recommend right now, but they can play rituals. They can play fusions. They can run synchros, XYZ, and synchro and XYZing are what the deck does really consistently, even more so than actually pendulum summoning. So even if you get deburied, it's not going to stop very much. It's not going to very much lose to anti-spell because it does main deck outs to anti-spell, which purple poison is the only thing afforded to the magician matchup. I'll give them that. But Zephyra can also, in addition to having its outs to anti-spell, it can play purple poisons as well. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that it's not really going to lose to a lot of the cards that pendulums lose to. In addition to that, it's not going to lose to Twin Twisters because it can protect its own skills from destruction. It's a very, very solid powerhouse of an archetype in regards to the pendulum aspect. So that's a little bit about it. Of course, it has the ability to break boards going second. It does play the strudel very well. In addition to that, it has access to some powerful synchros that even if their effectiveness gets negated, like for example Yazi, they can still help you to pick the board apart even if it's just baiting a negation. In addition to that, they have cards like Zephyra Thubin and Zephyr Saitan, which can easily snipe face-ups and face-downs, similar to thinking of their own Afterburner and Jamming Wave. It's going to pop cards regardless. They have the ability to add resources from extra deck to hand. They can transform monsters into tuner. They can monster reborn their own monsters. They can send scales back to the hand. They can special summon their own scales. They're afforded a variety, a myriad of different effects. Not all Zephyrs are going to be played, but you have to keep in mind that every Zephyr offers a benefit if you're willing to contribute the space in your deck to play the card. And that is what is known as an accoutrement. So that's a little bit about Zephyrs. They're a really powerful archetype, and there's a lot that you can do with them. Now, I'll get to the reason why I feel like this deck is going to be better than most decks moving forward into the new format. And as things stand, I feel like the decks that are going to be doing really good are decks that can get away with 2-card combos or less. And of course, Zephyr is one of those decks that can do so, because we're going to be in a format where if you're forced to go second, you're going to have to sacrifice a lot of your resources if you are able to even play through that board. And let's just be real, some of these boards just can't be played through if you're not opening up correctly. And opening up correctly can not only mean opening up with the necessary hand trap or disruption to kind of cut the percentage and potential of the board to whatever it would have been, to a certain extent of it, what it should have been, which is creating a subpar and mediocre board. Sorry, my nose is a little stuffy. Now, if you don't open up with a hand trap, obviously your deck's just going to have to be insane. And being insane meaning that your deck can generate a 2-card combo, because 4 of your 6 cards going second, if none of them were a hand trap, can be used to play through the board. Now, most decks can do that. They have to lose a lot of resources to play through negations, etc., etc. The only thing is the follow-up. And now the reason why Zephyr is so good with the follow-up is because it can play through disruption fairly easily. To a degree, it can tank even further than one of the most grindiest decks out, like Trickstars or Paleos. Altergeist they're a fairly grindy deck as well. Now, Zephyrs are afforded so much to their arsenal. And they do have the 2-card combos as well, like Gokis do, like Spirals do. Sky Strikers are a 1-card combo. The best decks right now are so good because they can main deck a lot of cards to, I guess you could say, counter the meta strategies, and at the same time still play the way that their deck is intended to play. Gokis, all they need is 2 warriors. Spirals just need 2 spirals. Trickstars just need a Candina, a Terraforming, or a Light Stage, or even just a hard-drawn Reincarnation plus a Droll. Even Sky Strikers, they just need an Engage, a Hornet Drones, or a Ray, right? Like, that's just going to start off their engine. Invoke, just an Alistair. I mean, there's so many different archetypes that can, play so many different forms of disruption and get away with it. And that is why I feel that Zephyr is going to be so good, because it's one of those decks. People overlook its potential because it's a very obscure play style. It's not very easy to master. I admit I have made a lot of mistakes learning this deck because it's not easy. It is one of those decks that are actually skill-based. It's not an autopilot deck. It's not going to win just because you did what the card said it's going to do. You have to know what you're doing. But if you know what you're doing, Zephyrs can do an amazing job. They can do so much more than you would ever expect them to do. And that is why I feel that they're going to be so good in this format. They happen to have in their arsenal and in their extra deck cards that inherently beat some of the best decks out here in the meta right now. Now, they do have searchable counter traps, which is even a more beneficial advantage that they have over any other deck right now, because no deck has searchable Solemn Judgments. Now, a Solemn Judgment, I'm not talking about something that can stop a monster. I'm talking about a counter trap that can negate anything that is not a summon. And being spell speed 3, it can only be answered to a card of its own caliber or criteria, meaning another counter trap. And that's pretty much the only thing that can stop it. In addition to it having searchable counter traps and being able to tank to such a high degree and playing through boards fairly well, if the deck is given the chance to go first, it's just as one-sided as letting Spirals or Goki go first. Except this deck is not going to lose to a raw spear mode. It's not going to lose to an evenly match. It's not going to lose to a red reboot. And it's certainly not going to lose to a Twin Twisters. Now, the deck can set up disruption in the form of monsters and back rows and hand traps. So you have 3 different layers of defense, and not all 3 of them are going to be able to be shut down in one turn. So again, that's another reason why Zephyrs are so good. Now let's talk about the two best decks right now. In my opinion, Sky Strikers is cool, but the reason why I feel like they're very fragile is because their engine is not only purely spells, but the only cards that are really going to start them up are going to be the Widow Ink. I'm sorry, not the Widow Anchor. They're going to be the Hornet Jones, the Ray, or the Widow, or the Startup Engage. While that is 9 cards out of their deck, without those cards, and if none of those cards are drawn, the deck is really fragile. And even if those cards are drawn, the deck really, all it does is generate pluses and advantage and set up, you know, like a couple sets in a pass. I've seen the deck being played, right? They're going to what? Play and engage. They're going to search their cards. They're going to try to resolve multi-roll. And at the end phase, multi-roll a couple Widow Anchors and then engage and pass. And they're going to pray that that is enough to hold them for a turn. Now, there are a lot of decks that can play through that and OTK. So Sky Striker's inherent weakness is decks that can OTK. Decks that will not afford it another opportunity, another chance, another turn to continue, you know, not necessarily like steamrolling past the opponent, but just to continue to gradually and consistently overcome the opponent in terms of sheer card economy. Not one-for-one exchanges, but pluses while your opponent minuses. So Sky Strikers are not going to be as powerful, especially not against Zephyra, but the two decks that I want to talk about that this deck does fairly well against are Gokis and Spirals. Gokis and Spirals are by far two of the most absurd and powerful archetypes that are currently two of the top 5 best decks in this format. Now, they're powerful going first or second, which makes their strategies very versatile. And the reason why Zephyras are such a good deck against those particular archetypes is not only because Zephyras can set up boards full of negation. I mean, just 3 negates is the minimum. Like, let's just be real. Like, the 3 negate board, that's just like the worst thing you can ever do. It's bad hands. I've done test hand videos to prove it. It's bad hands always generate disruption. This deck is never not gonna open up with negations. That's its inherent playstyle. It's its default capability, right? And the thing with Spirals and Gokis is while they can get their 2-card combo established, once they go into that 1-link monster, once they go into that Spiral double helix, or once they go into that what's her name? She's the Noble Knight, Isolde. If you can stop that link monster, whether you can stop its summon or just pop it, you know, Zephyrs can actually just like search, you know, different cards that can destroy cards. For example, if a double helix is summoned, you can just pop it. And in addition to that, you can still Ash Blossom, Ghost Ogre, Veiler. Like, there's so many different ways that Zephyrs can stop that. Once they establish that link monsters, Zephyrs have not an issue, not even a struggle with stopping the link. Even if chain links are set up accordingly to where Isolde's link summoning effect will resolve and she will search for another monster, she'll never be able to resolve her effect to send an equip. She'll never be able to special summon that Octo Stretch or that Headbat. And thus forth, that requires for you to have another combo extender like Monster Reborn or even Soul Charge. And that inherently will be negated. It's inevitable. So Zephyrs are not going to lose going first against Spirals or Gokis. And another reason why Zephyrs are very, very powerful in that particular matchup, let's talk about this card for a second. Now, this card is going to be more powerful this format than it ever has been. So, something interesting, I'm not sure if you folks noticed, but 2 of the best decks in the format, arguably the 2 best decks, their most powerful monsters, whether it's main or extra, well, I'd say Gokis, their most powerful monsters in main are all Earth monsters. Now, in the Spiral matchup, Super Agent indeed is in Earth, as well as Double Helix is in Earth, and Quick Fix. In the Goki archetype, practically everything's in Earth. Now, the reason why I brought that up is because Zephyras are able to synchro summon for level 9s, level 8s, level 7s, and level 6s. And there's one particular level 9 synchro that Zephyras and only Zephyras at the moment can make consistently, even through disruption, and set up an established board of back row to protect this card. Zephyrs is the only deck that can do that. Now, I'm going to read you Chao Feng's effect, and I'll explain to you exactly why Zephyrs are going to be even more powerful against Gokis or Spirals, just because they can make this card with ease. It's just like, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. So I'm going to read you Chao Feng the Phantom with the Yang Zing, because it's actually a powerful boss monster synchro. So while this Synchro Summon card is on the field, your opponent cannot activate the effects of monsters with the same original attributes as the Yang Zing monsters used for its Synchro Summon. Now let's pause. The only way to summon this monster is to use Earths. Zephyra and Zefraxi are the 2 Earths you are going to use to make this monster. If you Synchro Summon for this card, your opponent cannot activate Earth monsters' effects. So your opponent cannot activate Gouki Super X. And when I mean they cannot activate, it's not affecting the monster. It's affecting the player. They cannot activate graveyard effects. They cannot activate hand effects. They cannot activate on-field effects. So Goukis, they can't do anything. They need to summon Isolde and pray to God that her effect does not get negated, because they can no longer mask her effect with chain links using Gouki's effects to search. They can't do that. So they're going to summon her, her effect's going to try to resolve, you're going to negate it, and you're going to destroy her. They're going to pass turn. They can't even search rematch. Against Spirals, they can no longer resolve Double Helix. They can no longer resolve Super Agent. They can't resolve Quick Fix. Their best bet is not going to be 1-for-1. It's going to pray to God that they can normal summon a Spiral Tough and try to pop this card, which is going to be negated. Because remember, this deck searches counter traps like it's its job. So in addition to it pretty much being a win condition against Spirals and Goukis, meaning that they cannot pilot their best monsters, their strategy is inherently just done. If this card happens to be destroyed by any means necessary, whether it's you or your opponent doing so, you're going to be able to search a tuner monster from your deck to your hand. So even if your opponent is able to deal with this monster by some reason, you could search an Ash Blossom, a Ghost Ogre, or an Effect Veiler. That's very important because this monster is always going to leave you with another form of disruption. In addition to that, outside of the Gouki and the Spiral matchups, this card is inherently just so dominant because you can back up its ability with 9 Pillars of Yang Zings, which can turn this into a walking floodgate that can then transform itself into a hand trap after using a counter trap to negate and shuffle a card. So that's just one of the reasons why Spirals and Goukis are going to have a very difficult time playing against Zephyras. Now, another reason why Zephyras, I feel, are going to be one of the best decks is because it is the only deck right now in this format, period, that can consistently make Black Rose Dragon without an issue. And Black Rose Dragon, if given the chance to resolve, is going to be a win condition. It's going to inevitably break any established board as long as its effect resolves. Like I just said, if it's able to resolve, that's game over. Any deck with an established board, especially Altergeist, are going to lose so much advantage, so much sheer card economy, that once you Black Rose and you set up your board full of counter traps, a Naruto, a Jackal King, however you want to do it, they're not going to have enough resources to play through that and reestablish themselves. So the extra deck is also a beneficial recruitment. The extra deck that Zephyrs have, they have a variety of different monsters that they can make. Some of the best monsters they can make are synchro monsters. Zephyrs can do, like I said, so many different things. They can consistently make F.A. Don Dragster, which is on legs going to be an Altergeist Hexia without some of the cost. It's insane. It negates a spell, a trap, or the effect of a spell or trap. It also has the ability to make Yazi. Yazi is a monster that cannot be targeted. If it's destroyed, it special summons a Yang Zing from the deck, and it is a scrap dragon on legs. It's a powerful boss monster. It really is. It does so much in so many different archetypes, in so many different matchups. It also just so happens to be the bane of the existence of a Sky Striker deck, because Widow Anchor cannot target this card, and Widow Anchor has to target. The only way that they can destroy this is if they're able to resolve at jamming waves, because Afterburner targets a face-up monster and destroy it. And then if you successfully do so, while you have 3 or more spells in your grave, you pop a spell or trap, right? Jamming Waves has to destroy a set card. The card has to be set. So if Jamming Wave targets a set card playing against Zephyra, it's going to be a counter trap, and that's going to be negated. So without a Kaiju, Sky Strikers literally have no out to this card. There's no freaking way that they're going to have enough time to make a board load without his effect getting negated by a counter trap or being popped by Zephyr War. Are you catching my drift here? They can make cards that are so one-sided and unfair against Sky Strikers, Goukis, and Spirals. It's like they have auto wins, auto win conditions. Now, in addition to that, they also have a loop. They have a cute little combo where basically it fluctuates with these 3 cards right here. I'll show you right now. In addition to Zephyr being such a powerful and versatile Pendulum archetype, it is the only, and I repeat, the only Pendulum archetype up to date that exists right now that is tier 2 or higher that can make a true king of all calamities. Now, it's really easy for this deck to make this, believe it or not, and it's an auto win. It's literally an auto win. Calamities is gonna be Gokis, it's gonna be Spirals, Altergeist and Sky Strikers. They're gonna have to set and pass. Set and pass. They have no choice. They have to set and pass. It's going to defeat what's another really powerful deck? Trickstars are going to automatically lose against the Calamities. A Scapegoat can't even help them because they can't attack. They can't use effects. Calamities is such a powerful boss monster. It's so overlooked and underrated because very few archetypes are able to make it. The fact that Zephyras have this in their arsenal, like, are you catching my drift, brother? Are you catching my drift? Zephyrs can make so many different cards. It's absurd. Like, Zephyrs have this loop where they can make X-Saber Gothams, rip a card out of your opponent's hand, get the necessary knowledge that they need, so now I know what I'm playing. Even if you scoop, I know how to side deck now, and I know what next steps to take. I know which negation to search. I know which trap to search. I know what kind of board I'm going to make now. So they can make Gothams with ease, tribute him, rip a card out of their hand. They make Cloud Castle, bring back the Gothams, overlay for Calamities. That is a 3-card combo. All it requires is any way to get to gate 0 and a way to get out Zephyraxi and Zephyr Nui. That's like, the gate 0 is the only specific thing. Like, Zephyrs are going to be able to get Zephyraxi and Zephyr Nui out. Like, it's just by default. It's going to happen. And that combo right there is, it's game sealing. Like, it's bottom line, it's over. Because you also have hand traps. So, you know, I think I've talked a lot about the extra deck. And that's one of, like I said, the accoutrements of this deck. It can play so many different cards in its extra deck. Of course, it can play Electrum. It can make so many different things, and that's why this deck is so powerful, because given the specific matchup, it has a piece in its arsenal or even its repertoire that it can bring and utilize to combat that particular archetype or that particular matchup. There's not a single of the top 5 decks right now that Zephyr does not have an answer to. Like I said, if it's Goki or Spirals, you can go for this, or you can go for this. And also keep in mind, there's not a single deck out right now that can really play through 3 or 4 negations and still win. Like, you have to be God sent, and it has to be God's plan for you to win that duel. You have to literally be able to play through 4 negations, open with the Soul Charge, and, you know, me not read that you have it, basically. I'm like, if you're playing against Goki and Spiral, this is going to be an auto win. This is going to be an auto win against those decks. If you're playing against Sky Strikers, my brother, I mean, it's really simple. You just set up just like this. There's a 2-card combo where you can set up like this, and you're going to have a Zephyr Divine Strike. Now, those 3 negations are going to serve for the 3 best cards that Sky Strikers can open up with. That would be a Startup Engage, a Hornet Drones, or a Ray. Either one of those. That's all I'm going to be worried about. So in that matchup, that's how you can open up with. In the Trickstar matchup, unfortunately, if Trickstars are forced to go first, and they have the Reincarnation Droll thing, the only thing that's going to stop that is Ash. But outside of the Reincarnation Droll, Trickstars don't really have a solid matchup against Zephyrs, because Zephyrs are one of the very few decks that are Pendulum based that can grind to an extremely high durable degree. So inevitably, Zephyrs going second against Trickstars just have a higher ceiling in the terms of a grind game. Going first against Trickstars, Trickstars can't really do much. If you negate the Condina, they're going to have to pass. They can't chain Lycoris because it's a counter trap. They're just going to have to set their Scapegoat, set their cute little Reincarnation, and pray to God that you don't use the Zephyr Divine Strike on it. So just remember, the best decks right now in the format, Zephyr has an automatic win condition against those particular archetypes. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about the strategy of Zephyrs, but I think I also want to continue just reiterating the fact that Zephyr is able to play very, very powerful going second. Because using the Mythical Beast engine in this deck gives it an increased and higher ceiling just because now you're able to outboard using the Mythical Beast engine. You're able to play through Disruption with the Chronograph. You're able to protect your cards from destruction, which is insane. So Zephyrs, like I said, they have an insanely powerful going second. You can even use cards to bait negations and then just resolve your Dragon's Ravine or your Dragon Shrine to Black Rose their board. Like, I've done that. That's how I got my invite with this deck. I also want to talk a little bit about their field spell. We can just talk about their spells in general because similar to Sky Striker, or should I say Sky Striker, similar to Zephyra, Zephyra is an archetype that has an insane amount of searchability. It has at least 12 different cards that all serve the purpose of searching its entire engine. There's not a single card that has Zephyra in its name that this deck cannot search out turn one. So it's really, really consistent in that regard, and you're not going to have an issue with not getting the cards you need. You know what I'm saying? Some decks kind of play those 3Fs that you just have to open up with. Like, for example, any Goki monster, you're either searching it with the reinforcement of an army or you're just opening up with it, hard drawing it. So you have to play it at 3. Zephyrs don't need to do that. They have cards like Terraforming, Oracle of the Zephyra, Zephyr Providence, Dragon Shrine, heck, Foolish Burial, Emergency Teleport. They have all kinds of spells that serve dual utility, multiple purposes, very flexible. They even play a card, Dragon's Ravine. So you have all these spells that serve multiple purposes that can get you out of a bind, like, immediately. So I really want to start by talking about their field spell, and this is one of the reasons why Zephyra is so powerful. Now, they have a field spell that on activation can search a monster, but after that, it has effects that you are granted based on the particular, I guess you could say, summoning mechanic you utilize while using a Zephyr as a material. Now, the best feature of this field spell, I would definitely say, is the synchro ability. So if you synchro using a Zephyr monster, you can choose one monster from your deck, put that monster on top of your deck. So not only can Electrum draw, but you can use Stardust Charge Warrior with a combo. There's actually a combo where Zephyrs do that, to literally put this as Chainlink 2 and Charge Warrior as Chainlink 1, stack any monster. Raw Spear Mode, a Kaiju, an Ash, an Ogre, a Drolan Lockbird, shoot, a Destrudo. It can be any monster. There is no monster that Zephyrs cannot search. They're the only deck right now in this current meta that's actually consistent and can do damage in this format that can search any monster. It doesn't matter the level, the type, there is no restriction. They can search any monster, And how you can do that, like I said, is with Charge Warrior. You can even synchro summon, heck, use Electrum's effect to just draw. I've done this to a Draco player in Draco format. I stacked the Gamma Seal on top of my deck, and I just drew it and Kaiju'd. In particular matchups where you have the knowledge of what you're playing, especially after you've X-Saber got them, you can stack the Drolan Lockbird, because now you're like, oh, I'm playing Sky Striker. You can stack Drolan Lockbird on top of your deck and draw it. You can stack Ash Blossom and Ghost Ogre on top of your deck and draw them. You can search your hand traps, dude. There's no deck right now that can search any hand trap. I'm sure there's certain decks that can search some, like Where Art Thou can search a Drolan Lock. I'm sure like a deck can play Emergency Teleport to summon out a Ghost Ogre. This deck consistently flows and searches its hand traps. That, again, you have to keep that in mind. Like, every factor accounts. Are you catching my drift? This is why Zephyrs are such a powerful archetype as a whole. There is so many different things that they can do. They're mind-blowing, the things that they can do. Just that alone, being able to search any hand trap and put it on top of your deck. And keep in mind, this goes in tandem with your Chow Fang. So you can search your Drolan Lockbird off of your field spell and use the Chow Fang to search out the Ash Blossom or the Ghost Ogre. You'll know which one to search because you're going to know what you're playing after turn 1. So keep in mind, this deck can search its hand traps and it gets better. This deck can add its hand traps from the graveyard to the hand without using Firewall. It has access to a card known as Ptolemy M7. M7 can add a monster from either player's field or graveyard back to the hand. So if you're in a grind and you've Drolan Lockbirded your opponent or Ash Blossom or Ogre them, and you know that it's going to pose a crippling threat against him the following turn, you just make that M7, you use the effect of the field spell, you draw, you discard, you grab that hand trap from your graveyard, you set your negations, and you pass. So it searches its hand traps and it recycles its hand traps. So keep in mind, you have so many different ways to access your arsenal, to search out the cards that you need. It's insane, dude. And of the fact that this deck is able to use Emergency Teleport as a flexible card, another way to make Electrum, a way to make Black Rose Dragon, a way to make Chao Feng, a way to just bring out Ghost Ogre to pose a threat. It's just, there's so many different things that make the Zephyra archetype as a whole extremely powerful. I mean, I really hope that you guys are catching on to my drift now. I'm going to go ahead and move to the traps because aside from the spells, this is the other reason why Zephyra is so good this format. It has flexibility in what it searches. It doesn't just search one thing. Whatever the situation you're in for, Zephyra probably has a way to combat that, get yourself out of it, and climb back on top of the game. So Zephyr War is basically a Trident. It can target a Zephyr card and one card your opponent control, and you can destroy those cards. Now, this card has, I guess you could say, a hidden power. If you have 2 cards in your Zephyr scales, you can play this trap from hand. You can literally 9 pillars your opponent, pop Zephyr Nui, search this off of Zephyr Nui, and the same turn, turn 1 card into 2 disruptions and pop one of their cards after you've negated. And something that you have to know that's really good about 9 Pillars of the Yang Zings is it negates the activation of the card and then shuffles it into the deck. It does not destroy it. So card effects that would trigger on destruction, whether it's like, for example, I don't know, like let's say an Altergeist Hextia. Like, you wouldn't want to Solemn Strike a Hextia because even though you're negating its effect, it'll search. You don't want to Solemn Strike a Maliseek because Maliseek's going to search, right? Those are just examples. You don't want to strike like a Goki effect. You don't always want to negate. You know, like there's cards that have graveyard effects. Now, because this archetype has a searchable trap like this, it can say nay to specific cards that would generate some form of an advantage, which could turn back to bite you in the butt if you can't stop it. So this card can it can answer so many different things, and it also has another searchable counter trap. So basically both of these counter traps negate a spell trap or a monster. One destroys and one shuffles, and they're searchable. And keep in mind that you can recycle your traps with the card now known as Nightmare Griffin. So I think I've covered a lot about Zephyrs. And before I get to how you can really side deck with this deck, I want to explain to you how Zephyrs can just play regardless of the hand. So this deck actually has 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So these are all cards that facilitate your engine. You have this at 3, this at 3, this at 3. That's what, 9, 12, 15. You have 15 different cards that all are going to kickstart your engine. Now, I don't know about you, but Trickstars don't have 15 different ways to get Kandina. I don't know about you, but you know, Spirals do not have 15 different ways to search out their Spiral monsters. They have to hard draw them. There's not very many decks that have that many play starters that search the cards that set up your boards. They're not hard draws like Gokis. Gokis have to hard draw it, right? And that's totally fine. But this card right here is one of the most flexible and if not the best pendulum scale in the game. So Zephyra is another reason why this deck can play and have a myriad of hand traps and disruptions, so long as you have a way to get this scale and any other scale, whether it's high, whether it's low, it doesn't matter. You can play. You can open with, for example, this is a perfect example. You can open like this, right? You can open like this. You can open like this. You can open like this. You can even open like this, right? Any of these, any scale plus is a frat, right? Like let's say for example, you hard drew this, or let's say for example you have the purple poison. You're like, oh, I have no dark spellcasters. This is bad. So let's say you drew this, and then you drew a Ghost Ogre, an Ash Blossom, and a Drone Lockbird, and you're going second. This hand is actually not dead whatsoever, and this is a pendulum deck. What you're going to end up doing is you're going to make an Electrum, you're going to search out a counter trap, you're going to bring your Jackal King from your extra deck, from your deck to your extra deck, bring it to your hand, tribute summon it for it on the field, play your Providence, put a counter on it, and set up 2 negations after you've done this to your opponent. So you can hit them with 3 disruptions and then set up a board of 2 more disruptions, which is going to be extremely difficult for any deck. So I have to keep all of that in mind. You have to factor all these things in. There's a reason why I feel like Zephyra is going to be one of the best decks, and it honestly has the best matchup against the best decks right now. And now, because this deck is so powerful going first, nobody really wants it to go first. And you have to keep in mind that it's flexible with going second. So it's one of the few decks where you can actually pretty much tailor its side deck purely for going second. So this is where you're going to steal a lot of your wins, because now with the knowledge that this man is playing Zephyrs, and if he goes first, he's going to set up too many disruptions for me to stop, I'm going to need for him to go second. I want his counter traps to be dead. I don't want to have to deal with his first turn calamities, anything like that. That's where you're able to play cards like these. And now, you can build your side deck purely for going second when you're playing Zephyrs. And that is another accoutrement that this deck has, because some decks have to play side deck cards for going first because their going first game is not going to be that powerful once they start siding, because their engine gets weaker once you take cards out. Now, Zephyrs have too many different ways to search out their archetype, which is why you can afford to take out some of its strong cards and replace them with these. And you can open up with an Evenly, an Impermanence, even a Raw Spear mode, so long as you can get a Zephyra in any scale. And it doesn't always have to be a Zephyra or any scale. You just really have to be able to pendulum summon a Zephyr Nui. And his effect does not have to resolve. Once you've got him on the field, he's going to start your engine up. So you can do what's called a snowball effect with Zephyrs. So you also have to factor that in, that this deck is going to be side decking purely for going second. So it can play the counter side deck strategy, which is making your opponent think that you're going to go first and forcing them to go first and side decking for going second. It's another accoutrement that's afforded to the Zephyr archetype. So those are all, there's a lot of reasons that I feel that Zephyr are going to be extremely powerful against Goki, against Spirals, against Skystrikers, against Trickstars. Heck, even Invoked, if Invoked stays in the picture, I feel like these decks are going to struggle extremely against Zephyrs. Now, if I name any one of those 5 decks, none of them are going to do very well playing through 3 negations, 2 of which are a counter trap, and 1 can just be a Jackal King. None of those decks are going to play through that very well, and for some decks, that seals the deal. Just 1 Jackal King negating a double helix. Heck, even if you summon double helix back off of the quick fix, you're not going to be able to resolve his hard once per turn effect again. So 1 negation sometimes is too much for a lot of these decks. Negating the Alistair or the Invocation is the done deal for the Invoked, especially negating Alistair's effect and then shuffling him into the deck. If you had the Invocation in your hand, it's dead now. In Trickstars, negating the 1 Kandina, and Gokis, just hit the Sold or negate the rematch. Negate the rematch. Negate the Firewall. Like, these decks seem powerful, but they're very fragile if you interrupt them mid-combo. And Zephyrs are always going to open up with Disruption. It doesn't matter what the hand is. It's the only deck that is a Pendulum archetype that's not going to lose to D-Barrier. It's not going to lose to Anti-Spell. You can easily play around Ash, Ogre, even Joel Lock. Now, keep in mind when you're playing around Joel Lock, you want to summon your Zephyr Nui first. Resolve his effect, search a counter trap, and once they droll you, now you know what kind of board you can make. So it can easily play around all these cards. It's never going to lose against evenly matched. It always has multiple ways to stop the evenly. It's not going to lose against Raw Spear mode because the only monster it really puts out that's a threat is going to be Jackal King. If that, you can't really spear mode like a Jackal King and an Electrum. You can't spear mode an Electrum plus a Chow Fang. You can't spear mode a Calamity and counter traps. You can kaiju it, but it's not going to stop the counter traps from resolving. And in regards to the Red Reboot, you can chain your own counter traps to Red Reboot, and you can play Red Reboots. It's just, man, I think I've spoken enough on why I feel, in my opinion, that Zephyrs are probably going to be one of the best decks of this format, or just the best counter strategies to the best decks that are currently being played. Now, if you were patient enough to listen to this video, I hope that you obtained a lot of knowledge just in regards to Zephyrs. If you are a fan of Zephyrs, this is definitely for you. I think that's all I have for this video for right now. There's a lot more things that this deck can do that I did not mention, but we can go on. Just keep in mind that this deck can practically do anything. It can practically make anything. If there's an extra deck monster It can probably make it. Honestly, like it's really good as a deck. As an engine, it's really powerful. It can make rank 4s, rank 6s, rank 7s. Heck, it can make rank 9s. It can make level 5 synchros, level 6, level 7, level 8, level 9 synchros. It can link summon consistently just because it has access to Electrum and Chronograph. It can instantly make Borload under pressure. It's a powerful deck. That definitely concludes my reason and basically my video on why I think that Zephyrs are going to be one of the decks that are probably going to seal the deal at Nationals and even Worlds. And keep in mind, they're unhindered on the ban list in the OCG and the TCG. This is your boy 3 Stacks. I'm going to go ahead and sign out. I thank you guys so much. God bless you. Make good choices. Don't hurt your brain cells. And stay tuned for future content. Peace, yo.